It's been about 3-ish months, so you know what that means. It's time for a new balance update to Warhammer 40,000. I'm part-time competitive 40k sicko Campbell McLaughlin, here with my cat and Goonhammer's hot take on the March 2025 balance data slate for Warhammer 40,000. In this video, we'll talk about what changed in this update, who won, who lost, and what you need to know. And no, I didn't feel like setting up the green screen for this one. There's a lot to cover here, so we won't be drilling too deep into stuff like individual points changes, or else we'd be here all day. What we will do is get you up to speed with the big changes and the broad strokes of how it will affect the game. Also, if we don't mention a faction, chances are it didn't really change much. The needle really isn't being moved by Blight Haulers going down 5 points or whatever. If you do want to get into those details, head on over to Goonhammer.com, where we've got written overviews with commentary by people far better at this game than I am, going into exhaustive detail. Link in the description. Now let's go over what's changed. There's 3 big parts to this update. A new balance data slate. This mostly dials back some changes made in December and addresses some of the newer codexes and detachments which have been dominating in competitive play. Most of these changes, except for Sisters, are nerfs. A new Munitorum field manual. Many of the game's factions had point costs for their units changed. Some of these are a big deal, others not so much. 4 new detachments. There are new detachments for Chaos Demons, Custodes, Orcs, and Tau. Now the most exciting and unexpected part of this update are those new detachments. Clearly the deluge of new detachments from Grotmist went over well, and I expect we'll see more of this kind of update in the future. We'll be covering those new detachments in more detail in the coming days in detachment-focused articles on Goonhammer and detachment-focused videos right here on YouTube. I can't guarantee he'll be there though. Orcs, more Daka. Orc philosophers have theorized that the only thing better than Daka is even more Daka, and the fittingly named More Daka detachment has some wildly powerful shooting bonuses. The base detachment rule here gives all of your infantry and walker units sustained hits 2 on their guns, and they get assault during your WA. Keep an eye on this one, it's gonna be very good. Tau Empire Experimental Prototype Cadre. All you Tau players who love their Gundams can take advantage of the new Experimental Prototype Cadre, which buffs the range and output of your big guns and battlesuits. Units in this detachment increase the range of their ranged attacks by 6 inches. There's also a lot of buffs to your guns in the enhancements and stratagems. Adeptus Custodes, Lions of the Emperor. Custodes players can unleash the Lions of the Emperor detachment, which rewards spreading your army out and lets units operate better on their own. Your non-vehicle units get +1 to hit and wound as long as they're not within 6 inches of a friendly unit. Chaos Demons, Shadow Legion. Last but certainly not least is the Shadow Legion for Chaos Demons, a powerful Chaos Marine and Demon army led by Be'lakor himself. In this detachment, you can't take epic heroes or demon princes, but you can take a variety of Chaos Space Marine units, and you'll get bonuses for each of your god-specific demons. Index, Chaos Demons. On that note, Chaos Demons also got a huge update to their index, with sweeping points cost changes, a small number of units going the way of the Dodo, Slaanesh Chariots and Karanak, and the Legion of Excess being toned down to be, well, less excessive. A number of Demons datasheets also received updates. Slaanesh Demons now closely resemble their datasheets in Codex Emperor's Children. While some larger changes were made to Khorne and Nurgle Demons, most of them were buffs. Ironically, Tzeentch Demons didn't change. Let's start with the winners. A few of these won just by getting a lighter touch than the other factions, but the new detachments and some points drops definitely help a few armies out. Chaos Demons, except Slaanesh. Outside of Slaanesh, the faction's datasheets see huge improvements, and Nurgle Demons look set to be an army to beat. The Great Unclean One now has a +1 toughness aura and a built-in 6-up Feel No Pain that'll make him eye-wateringly difficult to kill, even without the Demonic Incursion enhancement. Beasts of Chaos also gain a scout move. Chaos Soup Connoisseurs also win big from Be'lakor's Shadow Legion, which is fantastic. There are a ton of cool rules in this detachment, and being able to add units of cultists to a demon army solves one of the army's biggest issues. But you're gonna have to pour a bottle of your finest out for Slaanesh. The Legions of She Who Thirsts saw the dreaded triple tap of points increases, datasheet nerfs, and data slate nerfs to the Legion of Excess detachment, and they lost their chariots. Adeptus Sororitas. The Sisters of Battle see healthy points drops on key units, primarily melee units, and the nerf to miracle dice made in the last update was partially rolled back. Now Sisters will get 1 miracle die each time they lose a unit, rather than just 1 per phase, giving them an actual number of resources to work with. This should go a long way to repairing the damage done to the faction, and it'll bring them back up to the middle of the pack. Orcs. While the Tactical Brigade detachment took a drubbing, more on that later, the Mordaka detachment is more than good enough to make up for it, potentially taking the Scrap Metal Crown as the best detachment for the entire army. Orcs already had a number of good detachment options, and getting away with only slight increases and a small nerf to tank bustas pushed them in a good position. Knights. The Imperial Knights skate by in this update with no nerfs despite being a top army, and they got a price drop on Dominus Knights, which are now cheap enough to put into strategic reserves. Meanwhile, Chaos Knights saw substantial drops on 3 of their big knights, which may open up some new options for the army. Plus, Nurglings got a little bit cheaper. Deathwatch. Like Knights, Deathwatch went into this as a top tier army, and they caught only the tiniest of nerfs, while also being vastly less impacted by the general Marine changes than all the other chapters and builds. Deathwatch players everywhere will read this update and breathe out a sigh of relief. Tau Empire. The Tau win big in this update, with points drops on some Kroot units and an amazing new detachment which buffs some already powerful shooting. Leagues of Votann. The detachment rule for Oathband moved to being an army rule, which means if you take the Hearthbound detachment, you now start with grudge tokens. That's a big upgrade, and it'll actually make it worth trying out the faction's Grotmist detachment. The losers. It's not all good news. Some armies and detachments got absolutely shellacked, though it's hard to feel too bad about armies which were built around taking advantage of loopholes. Speaking of, Space Marines. Space Marines got a broad sweep of point increases on their cheap shooting platforms, Vindicators and the Ballistus Dreadnought being the primary targets, plus some targeted hits to Ultramarine Epic heroes. The price jumps here aren't too bad, but the increase on Vindicators will affect almost every Marine list, and when you combine it with the Ballistus increases, Ironstorm armies are going to take a big hit. On a similar note, Bloodless Angels have been banished, as the loophole allowing them has been closed. Now if you take any non-Codex Marine detachment, like Blood Angels or Black Templars, you can't take advantage of the Codex compliant +1 to wound bonus on Oath of Moment, even if you don't take any variant chapter specific units. That means no more Liberator Assault Group or Righteous Crusaders with upgraded oaths. That said, it wasn't all bad. Guilliman, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves remained untouched, while Bladeguard Veterans and Centurion Devastators got cheaper. Astra Militarum. The Bridgehead Strike detachment got triple tapped with points increases on Scion units, a change to their detachment rule which swaps the bonus to wound for bonus to hit, and the Firing Hot stratagem went up to 2 CP while gaining a range requirement. On top of this, the faction generally took a hit with changes to Krieg Combat Engineers, whose remote mines dropped in range, need line of sight now, and aren't guaranteed to do quite as much damage. Legion of Excess. The Slaanesh detachment for Chaos Demons is more or less dead thanks to this update. Losing every flavor of Chariot, losing Feel No Pains on their keepers, and taking nerfs to the detachment overall are, let's be honest, excessive. Tactical Brigade. As we mentioned before, this detachment gets crumped, now only getting a single tactic per battle round, and they always have to roll a leadership test to avoid getting thwacked. Adeptus Custodes. With the new detachment, a buff to the Unstoppable stratagem and Solar Spearhead, and points drops on Shield Captains and Custodian Guard, the Adeptus Custodes are far from being big losers this update. However, those improvements are offset by increases to key units like Dreadnoughts, Wardens, and Blade Champions, leaving them a little worse on the whole. Eldari! Kinda. Craftworlders took the brunt of the Eldar nerfs this time, while Ynnari somehow made it out unscathed. Small points increases to Fire Dragons, Striking Scorpions, Dire Avengers, Dark Reapers, and Wave Serpents will affect Aspect Host lists, while a Sermon's once per game Hand of Asurian ability went from Anti-Infantry 3 up to 5 up, making it less of a guaranteed devastating wound machine. This is one of those times where all of the changes were negative, but the faction still somehow won on the balance. Overall, this was a lighter touch than we were expecting. Most of the adjustments were pretty minor, as long as you weren't playing one of those last few detachments, and I think it was pretty clear they were going to be hitting this update anyways. There aren't any sweeping changes to how the game plays or how armies interact with each other, and the game seems like it's in a pretty stable place overall. The big news here is definitely those new detachments, and we expect that at least 3 of them will see regular play, if not all 4. Mordaka is the most likely of these to be a problem, but playing Keep Away with the experimental prototype cadre could also be pretty rough going. That said, we think most armies are going to look pretty similar to how they've looked since December, save for Sisters. Ow. Okay. In terms of what wasn't hit, we're shocked Ynnari made it through this update relatively unscathed, though Eldar did see some point increases and a nerf to a Sermon. We also expected to see Deathwatch and Ultramarines take bigger hits, and it'll be worth seeing how the changes made shake out in the coming months. There were also some armies that could have used some more tweaking. Adeptus Mechanicus feels like they could have used a bit of help, but Sisters were the army that needed it the most, and they got it. We're pretty happy with where the game's at. It feels solid competitively, and adding new detachments gives players who may be waiting a long time on updates to their faction a real, free way to get excited about their army again. We're legit excited to build and test Shadow Legion lists, and while there may be a point in the future where there's too many detachments, we don't think we've hit it yet. If you want a deeper look into the changes from this data slate, head on over to Goonhammer.com, where we've got write-ups for Marines, Imperium, Chaos, and Xenos armies, plus detachment-focused articles walking you through the new detachments. If you like what we're doing and you want to support the channel, consider backing us on Patreon to join our Discord, get early access to videos, and other cool stuff. I've been Costin Kreismick Metagame with my co-host BJ Blaskowhiskers, mutually relieved that the long winter of the Bridgehead Strike is over. Thanks for watching. You hear this little guy?